The iron gates creaked open slowly, revealing a mansion so grand it looked like it had been carved from a dream. White stone columns, manicured lawns stretching like velvet, and windows that sparkled like ambition itself. But for the older white couple standing on the sidewalk, frozen in place, it wasn't the house that stunned them. It was the name on the deed. Elijah King. 22 years ago, they had once held a little black boy in their arms and called him their son. They had dressed him, fed him, told their friends they were open-minded, loving, and willing to go beyond color. But love, real love, had an expiration date they didn't see coming. The stares in the grocery store, the uncomfortable silences at family dinners, the comments that cut deep but never got discussed. It all added up. And one day, without warning, they returned him. No warning, no apology, just a signature and a cold drop-off at the agency. Elijah was 6, old enough to remember the color of the walls in his bedroom, but too young to understand why he no longer had a home. That moment cracked something in him. He didn't cry in front of them. He didn't scream. But inside, something shifted, something permanent. What they didn't know was that little boy would one day grow into a man with a fire too powerful to be extinguished by abandonment. He faced the foster system, the judgment, the isolation. He stared it all down and rose anyway. Because sometimes when the world tells you that you don't belong, you build a place where you do. And now, decades later, the couple who once couldn't find space in their lives for a black son were standing in front of the very house they had once dreamed of owning, only to find out that the child they had returned had not only survived, he had succeeded beyond what they ever imagined. But this story isn't about revenge. It's not about showing off wealth or proving a point. It's about something deeper, something more powerful than bitterness or pride. It's about what happens when pain turns into purpose, when silence becomes strength, when the one who was thrown away chooses not to slam the door shut but to open it again, on his terms. What did Elijah say when he saw them again? Why did he buy the very house they once wanted? And what did he do that left them speechless, not out of guilt, but out of something far more human? Stay with us. Because sometimes the most beautiful homes are not built with money, but with the pieces of a broken past finally put back together. Elijah's story didn't begin in a home filled with warmth, laughter, or lullabies. It began in a sterile hospital room on the south side of Chicago, where a scared, exhausted teenage mother signed away her parental rights with shaking hands and hollow eyes. She wasn't heartless, just hopeless. Elijah entered life not with a welcome but with silence. No family waiting, no name whispered with love. But just a few months later, the Donovans walked in, Michael and Sarah, white, middle class, proud of their open hearts and progressive ideals. They said they wanted to adopt a child who needed more love, a child who didn't look like them. At first, they treated Elijah like a gift from God. They posted his baby pictures online, signed him up for mommy and me classes, showed him off at church potlucks. Friends praised them for being brave. Strangers smiled at them like they were saints. But as Elijah grew older, things began to change in ways too subtle for words but too loud for a child not to feel. Questions followed them everywhere. Is he yours? Is he adopted? And the Donovans, once proud, now grew awkward. Michael avoided eye contact. Sarah brushed off questions with nervous laughs. Then came the stares at the grocery store, the whispered comments from relatives, the uncomfortable moments when Elijah's skin color became the elephant in every room. Sarah started trying to fix Elijah's hair, asking black coworkers for help without ever really understanding why texture mattered. Michael once got quiet when someone at a barbecue made a joke about raising a future thug. No one stood up for Elijah. No one told him what to believe, so he learned to believe nothing. He learned that love could turn cold without warning, and he started to wonder if maybe something was wrong with him. When he turned 6, something broke. He'd thrown a tantrum after being disciplined too harshly, knocked over a juice glass in front of guests, and shouted, "You're not even my real parents." The room froze. Michael's jaw tightened. Sarah didn't say a word. That night, they didn't tuck him in. And within 2 weeks, Elijah was dropped off at a child welfare office with a bag of clothes and a note that said they weren't emotionally prepared to continue parenting. That was it. No final hug, no goodbye, just a door that closed and never reopened. Elijah sat in a hard plastic chair for 5 hours that day, staring at the entrance, waiting for someone, anyone, to come back for him. No one did. The foster system became his new reality. Cold, rotating, conditional. He bounced from home to home, some kind, some cruel, none permanent. He was polite, quiet, and invisible. Teachers marked him present but never asked how he was really doing. Social workers checked boxes, not hearts. But despite it all, Elijah didn't fall apart. Somehow, he stayed standing. At 13, he met Mr. Thompson, a mentor at a local after-school program, who saw in Elijah what no one else had taken the time to look for. A black man who had once been a foster kid himself. "You're not broken," he told Elijah one night, after the boy confessed he didn't think anyone would ever keep him. "You're just being built differently." That was the moment something shifted. Mr. Thompson taught him coding, helped him apply for scholarships, pushed him to read, and more than anything, he stayed. Through rejections, bad grades, broken foster placements, he stayed. And Elijah, for the first time, began to believe that maybe his life wasn't a mistake. He started creating, writing code, building apps, winning small competitions, getting noticed. By the time he turned 18, he earned a full scholarship in computer science. College was hard. He was still healing, still waking up in cold sweats from dreams of being abandoned. But he pushed through. Internship after internship, startup after startup, until one of his apps took off and changed everything. By 27, he was a self-made tech entrepreneur. Not flashy, not boastful, but quietly successful. Then one day, while scrolling through a real estate site, he saw it. The house. The Donovan's dream house. The same one they used to drive by when he was little, saying, "One day we'll live there, Eli." The house with the wraparound porch, the garden Sarah always wanted, the big kitchen where Michael said he'd grow old. And in that moment, Elijah didn't feel anger. He felt something else. Not closure, not revenge. Just an invisible thread pulling him back. So he bought it, full price, no hesitation. And he didn't tell anyone until the day his realtor told him that the Donovans had inquired about viewing it. Financially unstable, recently returned to town, hoping to downsize, unaware who owned it now. Elijah didn't cancel the showing. He didn't hide. He simply waited at the door, not to shame them, not to gloat, but to face the ghosts, to see if he had healed. And as that gate opened and they stood there, speechless, staring into the eyes of the boy they left behind, Elijah said just 2 words: "Welcome home." Elijah didn't become strong because he wanted to. He became strong because the world gave him no other choice. After the Donovans walked away, after the system labeled him, returned, he learned the truth about life far earlier than most children do. No one is coming to save you. Each foster home brought its own set of rules, faces, and expectations. Some homes were cold but structured. Others were warm but chaotic. A few were outright dangerous, where shouting echoed off the walls like warning sirens, and food was earned more than shared. Elijah kept his head down. He stopped asking questions. He packed light and unpacked less. In one home, he wasn't allowed to keep a nightlight because it made the electricity bill go up. In another, he had to earn permission to open the refrigerator. But even in those years of quiet desperation, something inside him refused to fade. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was rage, or maybe it was just that tiny voice in his chest, the one that once called the Donovans mom and dad, still whispering that he was meant for more. He became obsessed with understanding how things worked. He'd take apart radios, fix broken phones, and read manuals like they were storybooks. His curiosity became armor. His intelligence became survival. But the world outside his foster placements wasn't any kinder. In school, he was the black foster kid. Teachers praised his manners but didn't push his potential. He was told to sit still, keep quiet, and be grateful for any help. No one expected greatness from him. No one asked about his dreams. He kept his A's to himself like secrets, kept his drawings hidden. His essays, written in spiral notebooks, were never read out loud in class. One day, during a history lesson, a teacher said, almost offhandedly, that children from broken homes often repeat the patterns they come from. Elijah clenched his fists under the desk and stared at the clock, counting the seconds until he could leave the room without crying. That night he wrote in his journal, "I will never be what they think I am. I will build something they can't ignore." At 13, his life shifted. A program at the community center offered free classes in coding, digital art, and entrepreneurship. He signed up, not expecting much, just a chance to get out of the house. That's where he met Mr. Thompson. Not a teacher, not a preacher, just a mentor who showed up every single week and saw Elijah. Not the label, not the file, not the stats. Mr. Thompson was the first black man Elijah had ever had a real conversation with. He talked to him like he was already someone. Not someone who could be something someday, but someone who was already worthy. And that changed everything. Mr. Thompson told him, "People will always try to define you by the worst day of your life. Don't let them. You get to write your own story." With Mr. Thompson's help, Elijah built his first website. It wasn't fancy, just a portfolio of digital designs he made in free software, but it was real. It existed, and it was his. From there, things snowballed. He entered competitions. Won second place in a citywide coding challenge. Used the prize money to buy a second-hand laptop. Spent late nights watching YouTube tutorials about front-end development, UI UX design, and startup strategy. His grades skyrocketed. His worldview expanded. At 17, he applied to 5 colleges. Got into 4. Chose the one with the strongest tech incubator and the farthest distance from the city that reminded him of all his losses. College was both a blessing and a battlefield. For the first time, he had space, but with that space came loneliness. Everyone else seemed to come with cheering parents and holiday traditions. Elijah came with silence, but he turned that silence into focus. He poured himself into learning, stayed up until dawn debugging code, took jobs on the side, freelancing, tutoring, even cleaning classrooms, anything to pay the rent and keep moving forward. And slowly, success began to knock. His sophomore year, one of his apps, a simple mental health tracker for kids in foster care, was noticed by a nonprofit. They offered to sponsor him, helping him scale it and present it at a national conference. That's when investors began calling. That's when Elijah's name started appearing in inboxes, newsletters, and podcasts. He stayed quiet about his past, not because he was ashamed, but because he wanted his work to speak first. By 25, he had founded a small but growing tech company focused on social impact. By 27, it was profitable enough to let him buy property, not just anywhere, but exactly where he wanted. And yet none of this erased the scars. He still had dreams where he stood at the Donovan's front door, knocking, but no one answered. He still heard that moment of being told, "We're not equipped," as if it was a judgment on his very existence. That's why, when he saw their dream home listed, the one they used to admire with wide eyes and future plans, something stirred in him. Not vengeance, not ego, just a quiet chance to rewrite a piece of history. When he bought the house, he didn't know they would ever come back. But when his realtor mentioned they were interested in viewing it, financially down on their luck, unaware who the current owner was, he didn't feel bitterness. He felt clarity. Life had come full circle, and when the moment came when they stood at the front porch, staring into the face of the boy they had once turned away, Elijah didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand anything. He simply opened the door. Because while struggle had shaped him, it had never hardened him. And growth, real growth, isn't loud. It's quiet. It's measured in the strength to welcome back the past and know that it no longer controls you. As they stepped into the house, the one they once wanted for themselves, Elijah saw the shock in their eyes, the apology that trembled on their lips but never made it out. He didn't need it. He had already forgiven them, not for them, but for himself. Success didn't arrive in Elijah's life like a lottery ticket. It arrived slowly, piece by piece, built on years of sleepless nights, silent determination, and a fire inside him that refused to burn out. After the first investment came in from the nonprofit supporting his mental health app, Elijah knew he had something real. Not just an idea, not just a survival story, but a solution. He didn't build apps for clicks or attention. He built them to solve the pain he had once felt. The tracker he created wasn't just code. It was a map for other foster kids to navigate feelings no one around them seemed to understand. Simple tools like check-in features, emotion scales, and journal prompts, things he wished someone had given him when he sat alone in strange bedrooms at age 6. The response was overwhelming. Schools began to implement it in aftercare programs. Child welfare organizations called asking for customization. One social worker told him, with tears in her eyes, this could save lives. That moment, more than any paycheck, changed him. He realized his past wasn't a weight, it was a weapon. By 25, Elijah had launched 2 more products, one for foster parents focused on trauma-informed care, and another for aging out youth to access housing, job boards, and financial literacy tools. The company grew fast but not flashy. He turned down media interviews that wanted to frame him as a tech genius who overcame adversity because he wasn't interested in being a token. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted systems to change. And while investors often tried to steer him toward more profitable markets, Elijah never lost sight of his mission. We're not just building apps, he told his team. We're building bridges. He worked harder than anyone else, not out of insecurity, but because he still felt he was carrying the weight of every kid who didn't get out. The one still stuck in the system. The one still waiting on the other side of a door that may never open. And yet, even in the middle of all this purpose-driven work, Elijah struggled with something far more personal: peace. Despite everything he had built, there were nights he lay awake in his penthouse apartment, wondering why he still felt haunted by the past. He'd forgiven the Donovans, or so he told himself. But forgiveness, he learned, isn't a light switch. It's a process. One night, while scrolling through property listings, not with intent but out of habit, he stopped cold. It was the house, the Donovans' dream home, the one they used to admire when they took family drives, back when they still called him our boy. A white colonial-style mansion with a long driveway, bay windows, and a swing in the front yard. He could still hear Sarah's voice. One day, when we've saved enough, this will be ours, Elijah. He stared at the screen for a long time, not because he wanted to buy it out of spite, but because he wanted to buy it on his own terms. It wasn't about showing them who he had become. It was about reclaiming the narrative. That house wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of a future he was once cut out of, a dream built on exclusion. So he called his realtor the next morning. No negotiations, full price, all cash. When the seller asked why he was so eager, Elijah just said, "It's time." He didn't tell anyone else, not even Mr. Thompson. He moved in quietly, not changing much. He preserved the swing set, the garden, let the space speak for itself. He spent his mornings on the porch with coffee, his nights writing code by the fireplace. The stillness was strange at first, but healing has a rhythm, slow, patient, unforgiving in the best way. Then one day his realtor called. A couple asked to view the property. They think it's still available for rent. Michael and Sarah Donovan. Elijah didn't speak for a full 10 seconds, not because he was shocked. They had returned to the area after all, but because of how calm he felt. He didn't panic, didn't rehearse, just said, "Let them come." The day they arrived was sunny, clear skies, no storm to warn them of what was coming. When they stepped through the gate and saw him standing there, tall, composed, wearing a gray sweater and soft eyes, they froze. Sarah put a hand to her mouth. Michael's posture wilted like a man unprepared to meet his own history. They didn't recognize him immediately, but his eyes gave him away. Elijah didn't flinch. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask how they were doing. He simply held the door open and said, "Would you like to see the place?" His voice was steady, almost kind, and as they stepped inside, every memory returned. The things they had once imagined for themselves now standing polished and perfect in front of them. The kitchen Sarah adored, the wide staircase Michael used to daydream about, but now it belonged to someone else, to him. Elijah let the silence do most of the talking. They wandered room to room in a daze, offering compliments that sounded more like regrets. At one point, Michael turned and said, "We never meant to hurt you." Elijah nodded but didn't reply, not because he was cruel, but because no explanation could undo what was done, and he didn't need it to. As they stood by the fireplace, Sarah finally asked the question they were both afraid to voice. "Why did you buy this house?" Elijah took a breath, looked around the space, then met her eyes and said, "Because I needed to remind myself that I was never the problem. This place used to represent a life I thought I'd never have, but I made it without anyone handing it to me. I bought it not to prove anything to you. I bought it to prove something to me." They didn't respond. What could they say? The truth was standing in front of them in the form of the boy they left behind, now a man, whole and unshaken. He didn't need them anymore, and somehow that fact hurt them more than if he had chosen anger. Elijah walked them to the door gently. No bitterness, no triumph, just quiet strength. Before they left, Sarah turned and whispered, "You've done well, Elijah. We're proud of you." Elijah smiled faintly and replied, "I know." Then he closed the door, not to shut them out, but to finally let himself move on. Because success isn't about the money, the titles, or even the houses. It's about reclaiming your voice and choosing peace over pain when no one else ever did. They hadn't planned to say anything more. After walking through every room in silent awe, Michael and Sarah were already halfway to the door when Elijah spoke. Not loudly, not sharply, but with a steady weight that stopped them in their tracks. "You know," he began, standing in the same foyer where they once imagined hanging family portraits, "for the longest time, I thought there was something wrong with me. I used to think love had an expiration date, and I had already passed mine." Sarah turned around slowly, her eyes glossy. Michael stiffened, hands shoved into his pockets like they could hide everything he'd ever failed to say. "I waited," Elijah continued, not accusatory, just honest. "I waited for years for a letter, a call, even a message through the agency. Something to tell me you remembered, but all I ever got was silence." His voice didn't shake. It had taken him years to get here, not just to this house, but to this kind of calm. "We didn't know how," Sarah finally said, her voice trembling. "We were scared. Everything got so complicated. And we thought, you thought it'd be easier to walk away," Elijah finished for her gently but firmly. "I understand now. Maybe not agree, but understand." There was a long pause, the kind that only exists between people who share a history too painful to unpack all at once. "We were young," Michael added, finally meeting Elijah's gaze. "Naive. We thought love would be enough. But when people started judging us, when your behavior changed, we panicked, and we failed you. We failed you completely." Elijah studied him for a moment, reading the sincerity behind the shame. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't polished guilt. It was real. "You didn't just fail me," he said quietly. "You taught me not to trust anyone, not to believe in permanence. Do you know what that does to a 6-year-old? Every door after you looked like a trap." Sarah looked like she wanted to collapse. Michael stepped closer but didn't dare reach out. "We're sorry," he said, voice hoarse. "We really are. I don't expect you to forgive us. We don't deserve that, but thank you for letting us walk through this, for letting us see what you became." Elijah smiled faintly, almost sad. "What I became wasn't because of you. It was in spite of you, but I guess I still carried a piece of this place with me, even after everything." He walked slowly into the living room, motioning them to follow. They sat awkwardly, like guests in a museum of regret. Elijah stood by the window, gazing out at the old oak tree he once played beneath. "Do you remember the swing you promised me?" he asked suddenly. "You said we'd build one together when I turned 7. Sarah looked like she might cry, and for the first time Michael's eyes filled with something deeper than guilt, grief. "I do remember," Sarah said softly. "I've never stopped remembering." Elijah nodded. "Well, it's out there now. I put it up last spring. Not for me, but for the kid I used to be. I think he deserved to have one memory that matched the promise." They were silent again, not out of discomfort but out of reverence. Like they understood this wasn't just a house, it was a memorial, a redemption story. "Why did you let us come here?" Michael asked finally. "You could have just denied the showing. We wouldn't have known." Elijah turned toward them, voice calm and clear. "Because I needed to know I could face you, and not hate you. I needed to prove to myself that I've healed. And maybe, deep down, I hoped you'd see what you missed." Sarah covered her mouth, shaking her head. "We see it, Elijah. We see it now." "Good," he replied, "because I want this to be the last time we ever talk about the past." Her head lifted, surprised. "You don't want to stay in touch?" "No," Elijah said gently. "I don't need more confusion. I don't need a forced relationship or years of awkward holidays. I've built a life. I'm not angry anymore, but I also don't want to open a door that's already closed. Some endings deserve to stay endings." They didn't argue, they nodded, slowly, painfully, respectfully. Michael stood, extended a hand not for closure but for gratitude. Elijah shook it. Then Sarah hugged him. It was brief, shaky, and silent. The kind of hug that holds everything words can't say, and also everything too late to matter. As they walked out the front door, Elijah stood for a moment in the hallway alone. He looked at the framed photo on the table, him at 17, receiving his scholarship. No family beside him, just him and the future. He smiled, not with triumph but with peace. The confrontation wasn't about anger, blame, or justice. It was about reclaiming power through grace, about showing the world and himself that the deepest strength often lies in knowing when not to reopen a wound. He didn't need to be their son anymore. He didn't need to be anybody's definition of resilience. He was Elijah King, whole, grounded, and finally free. That night he sat on the swing under the oak tree, the wind brushing through leaves like quiet applause. For the boy who survived, for the man who returned, not for revenge, but to write the final chapter on his own terms. Elijah didn't tell many people what happened that day. Not his team, not his closest friends. It wasn't something he needed to broadcast. Because some victories aren't meant for applause, they're meant for quiet moments of reflection. That night, after Michael and Sarah drove away for the last time, Elijah didn't celebrate. He didn't feel vindicated or heroic. He simply sat on the front steps of the house, his house, and breathed. Long, slow, steady breaths that tasted like closure. The confrontation hadn't been about revenge. It had been about freedom. Not from them, but from the part of himself that still questioned if he was ever enough. And that's the real message. We spend so much time in life trying to prove ourselves to the people who couldn't love us properly. We chase success, admiration, and validation, not because we're greedy for praise, but because we're still haunted by the echo of being unwanted. But Elijah had learned something most people spend a lifetime avoiding. You don't heal by forcing others to understand your pain. You heal when their understanding no longer defines your worth. The Donovans didn't give him the apology he might have once hoped for. And yet what they did give, through their presence, their shock, their stunned silence, was a mirror. In that mirror, Elijah saw who he had become, not the angry child, not the wounded teenager, but the man who stood in his own truth and didn't flinch. He realized then that forgiveness wasn't about them deserving peace. It was about him choosing it, about not letting old pain keep writing new chapters. And that's what makes Elijah's story different. He didn't just survive the trauma, he transcended it. He didn't need to tear anyone down to rise. He didn't need to win to feel whole. He just needed to own his narrative. To say, yes, this happened to me. And no, it doesn't get to define me anymore. That mindset is powerful. In a world obsessed with revenge stories and dramatic takedowns, Elijah chose a quieter kind of strength, the kind that doesn't make headlines but changes hearts. Because the truth is, many people watching this may never get the apology they're waiting for. The parent who left, the friend who betrayed them, the system that failed them, those wounds may never be acknowledged. But Elijah's journey reminds us that healing isn't something we ask permission for. It's something we claim, piece by piece, breath by breath, day by day. And it doesn't always look like success on the outside. Sometimes healing is simply walking into a room you once feared and realizing it no longer controls you. Sometimes it's answering the door to your past and realizing you've outgrown it. Elijah didn't become great because someone finally saw his potential. He became great because he never stopped believing it was there, even in the silence, even in the absence, even when every reason to give up seemed more reasonable than hope. And so, the real message isn't just about forgiving those who hurt us. It's about reclaiming the power we lost when we believed we were broken. It's about building homes inside ourselves so complete, so grounded, that no one's rejection can shake our foundation again. Elijah's mansion wasn't made of stone and wood. It was made of resilience, boundaries, wisdom, and grace. That's the mansion we all deserve to build. Not for show, not for revenge, but because healing is the greatest legacy we can leave behind. In the quiet that followed, Elijah realized something he hadn't expected. It wasn't the house, the success, or even the closure that mattered most. It was the choice. The choice to face his past not with vengeance but with presence. The choice to hold space for pain without letting it take over the entire room. And above all, the choice to close the door, not with anger but with peace. We all carry doors like that. Some of them open to memories we'd rather forget. Others hold people who left too soon or stayed too long. Some are filled with words we never got to say. And often, we spend years standing in front of those doors, waiting, hoping, hurting, wondering if we'll ever feel strong enough to knock or brave enough to walk away. Elijah's story isn't extraordinary because of the wealth he built or the headlines he could have chased. It's extraordinary because he found the courage to let the past visit, but not live with him anymore. That takes more strength than any comeback ever will. Life isn't always about proving them wrong. Sometimes it's about proving to yourself that you were always right to keep going. Elijah didn't win because he made them feel guilty. He won because he made himself whole. And maybe that's the invitation for all of us. To ask, what pain are we still carrying that doesn't belong to us anymore? What chapter are we stuck rereading, hoping for a different ending? What story are we letting define us when we could be writing a new one? Because healing isn't just a feeling, it's a decision. A quiet one, repeated daily. It's choosing to let go when we could hold on, to grow when we could stay small, to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because we do. So as you reach the end of this story, maybe it's not really the end. Maybe it's a beginning. Maybe Elijah's journey was never just about him. Maybe it was a mirror for you, for anyone who's ever been left behind, for anyone who's ever had to rebuild from the rubble of someone else's choice. And if you're still carrying that weight, still standing in front of your own closed door, this is your sign. You don't have to wait anymore. You can walk forward. You can build your mansion, not out of bitterness, but out of everything that once tried to break you. And when the past knocks, you'll know exactly what to do. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, "Look what I became." It's simply, "I'm still here, and I'm finally free."